So is the presentation not visible now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what I will discuss today as part of this alumni lecture is my experience at Sri Chitra Tirunal Institute for Medical Science and Technology, Trivandrum, in the area of development of medical devices, especially related to one product which has become extremely popular in the market, the artificial heart valve. We call it as a frugal innovation story, mainly because this was a product which we started way back in 1980s, and with the minimal resources and with a lot of effort, we could bring the product to the market and save the lives of more than 150,000 patients suffering with valvular diseases during the past 30 years or so. So what I'll describe today is a brief overview about the need for an Indian valve. There are a lot of artificial heart valves available in the market during the period. Then why do we have to make one of our own? That was the question which needs to be answered. Then there are three different models of Chitra valve. TC1, TC2, and a new model which is coming up probably in a couple of years, tissue valve. Then on the concept of frugal innovation and need for indigenous R&D in the area of healthcare technology or medical devices. This will be the scope of the discussion. I'll start by introducing the institution where I work. This is named as the Sri Chitra Tirunal Institute for Medical Science and Technology, located in Trivandrum. It's an institute of national importance under the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. And the institute is named after the erstwhile ruler of Travancore, His Highness Maharaja Chitra Tirunal Balarama Varma, who was the last king of the state of Travancore. The institute has three arms. The biomedical technology wing where I work, where all the R&D work related to medical device development takes place. Then we have a tertiary care hospital for cardiac and neuro specialties. This could be the arm which is quite popular amongst people of Kerala. And then we have a third arm working in the area of health science studies, that is public health domain. Achyuta Menon Center for Health Science Studies. These are the three arms of the institute. Then during the past 40 years of existence, this institute has been instrumental in developing many medical device technologies and transferring to the industry. In fact, there are more than 60 successful technology transfers and about 20 commercial successes. We rate a commercial success as something in which the product should be able to capture about 25% of the market share, or the product should sustain in the market for more than 10 years, or the product should get the very coveted regulatory clearances like the CE mark and the US FDA approval. If any of these three sort of stages are achieved, then we call it as a commercial success. Now we'll come back to the topic of the day, need for an Indian valve. Why should we develop our own valve? So before getting into the details of the story, I'll give you a brief on the product and how and where it gets used. Just to brush up your +2 biology lessons. The heart and circulatory system is depicted here as a small sketch. Basically, the circulatory system is primarily the transport system of the body, where blood acts as the media. It has to transport many nutrients and sort of materials to various parts of the body. and also has to do the waste removal from the different locations. So all these jobs are done by the transport system, which primarily constitutes the blood. Then the drive for this particular blood flow is achieved through a set of positive displacement pumps, two pumps working at tandem, the left side pump and the right side pump, and these two pumps form the drive for the entire circulatory system. And the blood vessels, which are either the arteries, which take blood from heart into various parts of the body. Then you have the veins, which collect impure blood from various parts of the body, brings it back to heart, and then send it to lungs for oxygenation. So this is the sort of physiological system we all learned during the early days. So we'll just try to look at the circulatory system from an engineer's perspective. As I mentioned earlier, the heart can be considered as two positive displacement pumps working side by side. You have the left side pump, which consists of the left atria and the left ventricle, the left atria being the collection chamber and the left ventricle being the pumping chamber. And you have two valves, one at the inlet of the pumping chamber and one at the outlet of the pumping chamber. At the inlet, we have a valve named as the mitral valve. And at the outlet, we have the aortic valve. So these two valves are located on the left side of the heart, which pumps the blood to the entire body. Being designed to pump against the resistance of the body, the left side heart has to work harder than the right side heart, which consists of the right atrium and the right ventricle. The right side heart has to pump only against the lung resistance. So it's a slightly a lower capacity one. Of course, this right side heart also has two valves, one at the inlet and one at the outlet, called the tricuspid valve and the pulmonary valve. Now, the problem with these positive displacement pumps and valves is if the valves become leaky or if it starts offering resistance to forward flow, then we know that the pump has to work harder to achieve the same level of output. And the level of output required is dependent on the work we do, during exercise or other routine jobs. There will be specific requirement of blood flow from the heart. So if the valves become damaged, then the heart has to work harder. And this causes a lot of strain on the heart, eventually sort of leading to cardiac heart failures. Now, what are the reasons for the damage to these valves? The primary reason is a particular disease called rheumatic fever. This rheumatic fever is a disease which sort of catches the young population in the age group of 5 to 15 years. It starts as continuous and intermittent throat infection. If this particular throat infection is not treated using antibiotics or other means, then there is a possibility that this can lead to rheumatic fever and eventually lead to rheumatic heart disease. And this rheumatic heart disease, the outcome of this rheumatic heart disease is it sort of destroys the valves in the heart. It makes the valves stiffer, and sometimes the leaflet doesn't open and close properly, having two different types of failure modes. One is called regurgitation, to mean that during the closed phase of the valve, there is a leak back of blood into the previous chamber. And the second failure mode is called stenosis, which means that the valve offers excess pressure drop. It offers excess resistance to flow, thereby increasing the pressure drop across it. Both these conditions make the heart inefficient, and this has to be managed. There are different strategies which are used for managing this disease. One such strategy is to use corrective procedures. And these corrective procedures could be either a balloon angioplasty, like what is normally done in this coronary arteries, what we call as a coronary angioplasty. A similar angioplasty technique can be used on the natural valves of the heart to make it make the leaflet sort of little pliable and easy to move, so that the stiffness and the resistance to flow can be reduced. If the valve is leaky, then that can be corrected using a particular technique called implanting an annuloplasty ring. It's a small metallic or a plastic ring which is implanted on the valve annulus by correcting the shape of the valve. So these are the two strategies used for correcting the damaged natural valves. But the problem with this particular strategy is it is not usable in every case of valvular disease. It can be used only in very few cases, probably about 10 to 15% of the defective valves. In the rest of the cases, we need to replace the natural valves using artificial ones. These artificial valves are nothing but a check valve which opens in one direction and closes or rather blocks the flow of blood in reverse direction. And there are different types of valves available in the clinic now. Some of the valves are called tissue valves because these valves are made either from a tissue derived or tissue extracted from animals or extracted from other patients or from the patient's own pericardium. Pericardium is a small sac-like structure or a membrane which sort of covers the heart. And this membrane is cut off and that is used to stitch into the shape of a valve and use it. Other options are you can use the valves of certain animals and they can be processed and used. And such valves are called biological valves or tissue valves. Then we have another type of valves called the mechanical valves, which are of different types, like the caged ball, which was very popular in the 60s and 70s, 1960s and 70s. Then we have a tilting disc valves, which became popular in the 80s and 90s. And the latest one is the bileaflet valve, which came into the market in the mid 80s and became a sort of a gold standard in the case of mechanical valves. So these type of valves are used by the surgeon for replacing the natural devices or natural leaflet valves. Now let's have a look at the scenario in India in 1980s. This rheumatic heart disease, due to the prevalence of rheumatic fever, was having a rampant attack on younger population, and it was estimated that about 1.2 million children are at risk of this rheumatic heart disease. That means about 2 lakh youngsters are likely to have valvular disease, and bulk of the requirements were met by imports, and imported valves were relatively expensive. In 1980s, the cost of the valve was about 4,000 to 5,000 rupees. That is when a fresh engineer will join a good lucrative firm with a salary of 100,000 rupees. That means it's about 5 times the salary of a fresh engineer, and that is the type of cost of valves during the period. And this was not affordable to many. And there was a need for a cost-effective solution. This is the genesis for the development of artificial heart valves in India. And these figures are some of the valves which were very popular in the 80s. And in fact, there are different types of valves called caged disc, caged ball, and tilting disc valves. Now, one particular phenomena which need to be understood regarding the tissue valves or the bioprocesses is that in young patients, the life of these valves are extremely low. If you look at the chart now, for a 70-year-old patient or a population with more than 70-year-old patients, the average event-free survival of the valve is more than 80% at somewhere about 20 years of use. But whereas for a 20 to 40-year-old young population, the average survival at 10 years is about 50%. That means the patients has to go through revision surgeries almost at every 10 to 12 years. And a patient who has to go on this valve replacement at the age of, say, 25 has to go through at least 5 or 6 replacements of the valve, which increases the risk of this revision surgery and other associated complications. So it was felt that the biological valves or the bioprocesses are not the solution for Indian population because the primary reason for valvular disease in India is rheumatic fever, and it affects the younger population. And by the time the person becomes 25 or 30 years of age, he has to have a valve replacement. So with this background, I'll just get into the timelines, what happened during the 40 years from 1980 onwards. The first project on heart valve development was initiated in 1980s, and the entire infrastructure and knowledge base need to be built as none existed in the country at that point of time. Then the first model of the valve, what we call as the TC1 model, it reached the clinic after failure of 3 models. I'll discuss these failures in the subsequent slides. And it had a unique feature that it employed a soft disc. In 1995, this particular valve was launched commercially, and till now, more than 140,000 implants have been made. And the first patient who got implanted on 6th December 1990 has completed 30 years with this first valve. The second model, called the TC2, came into the clinic very recently, and it has a lot of improved features like MRI compliant, as well as improved performance also. So the clinical trials of this particular device is in the process, it's going on now. And by 2025, the institute will be coming out with the third model of the valve, which is the tissue valve. This is mainly because the average age of the patients who are undergoing valve replacement is steadily increasing, mainly because the rheumatic heart disease is getting controlled by prophylaxis at the community level. And the primary reason for damaged valve is changing from congenital or rheumatic heart disease to degenerative diseases that occurs when the patient or the person ages. So the average age of a valve recipient now is in the late 40s, and in another 10 years, it is expected that the average age will reach 60 years. And when it becomes 60 years, more than 50% of the valves will have to be in the tissue valve segment. And hence we have started the third model of the device 3 or 4 years back, and it's expected to come to the clinic in another 2 to 3 years' time. Now I'll give a little more details on the development of the Chitra valve TC1. It is the first valve which came to the clinic. In fact, we had a lot of failures. In fact, it's a project which went through a large number of failures, but all these failures were contained within the laboratory environment, and we were able to take only the successful or the fully functional device into the clinic. The first model, which got developed in 1983, and that had a titanium. Titanium is a metal which is good, which has a good biocompatibility, blood compatibility, and is corrosion resistant. And these are the factors which led to the choice of this material. And we had a polymer, a soft disc here, made of a polyacetal called Delton. It is more like we are trying to build the capabilities for fabricating as well as testing the valve. So we chose to have a model which is already in the market, a Dock-Shiley standard valve with the Delton disc as the model. This was more to build our capabilities. By 1985, we had first of our own device, which had a titanium cage. In fact, the valves have three components. One component is the cage or a frame, a metallic frame, which is used as an anchor for the disc or a tilting disc. And the tilting disc acts as the opening and closing mechanism in the valve. Then the entire device is stitched onto the muscles of the heart using a fabric ring, which is expected to get interfaced with the tissue, and slowly tissue will grow into the fabric and form a nice joint. That is what is expected of this polyester fabric. So the first model which came to the laboratory, and this particular model went through some of our studies and found that this titanium is not up to the mark, in the sense that the wear rate of titanium is extremely high, and because of this the device will not last for the required service life. Incidentally, what we have to understand in this particular device is, even though it's a small device with very little few number of components, this device has to work for 2000 million cycles. 2000 million cycles is 2 billion cycles. That is the number of times a human heart beats during a span of 50 years. Normally in engineering, we design any reciprocating or a rotating machinery for about 10 raised to 6 or 10 raised to 7 or at the most 10 raised to 8 cycles. 10 raised to 8 cycles means it's about 100 million cycles. But here we have to have a design which works for 2000 million cycles. And that is the challenge in this particular device. And none of the engineering reliability analysis like the SN curves or the fatigue failure analysis or the shear energy strategies doesn't work for such a long duration fatigue environment. And that is where a lot of evaluation and test systems were to be fabricated and validated to ensure that the device will work for a period of 2000 million cycles. So what we found in the case of this first model is that this particular device will fail after about 200 to 300 million cycles, and that corresponds to about 4 to 5 years or maximum 6 years life inside the patient, and this was not acceptable to us. So we sort of started looking for alternate materials, and within 2 years we had a new model in which the titanium in the first model was replaced by a cobalt-based alloy, Haynes 25, and it had a coating of titanium nitride. And this titanium nitride is a ceramic and is supposed to have extremely good blood compatibility and biocompatibility. And these are the two mandatory criteria for all materials which are used in medical implants. Then the disc from Delrin, we have already moved to a single crystal sapphire. The same single crystal sapphire prevailed in the case of the third model. But to our surprise, about 2% of the sapphire disc fractured in our test systems. And actually, we didn't have sufficient quality control strategies to screen out this 2% sapphire disc. And because of this particular reason, even though this was a good valve and would have lasted about 15 to 20 years without any problem in the clinic, in the patient, we had to abandon this particular model. Then they looked for an alternative material for sapphire was started, and it took about another 3 years to come out with the currently available TTK Chitra valve. It has same Haynes 25 cobalt-based alloy frame and ultra high molecular weight polyethylene. It's a polyethylene with a molecular weight in the range of 4 to 6 million Dalton. And this particular model went through all the qualifications, and it sort of reached the clinic in 1990. And in 1995, the product was launched commercially. Now let us get into some of the sort of technical aspects of this particular development. When the sapphire disc failed in the titanium nitride sapphire combination, we had to look for a material which is soft, which has good toughness, and will last for 50 or 60 years without any corrosion, degradation, etc. So we chose many materials like Delrin ST, Eknol PTFE, then Delrin AF, and ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene, and did a series of studies to find out the durability of these materials. Finally, this particular ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene came out as the best candidate. And this is the current model of the valve which is in the market. We have this metallic portion is made from Haynes 25 alloy, which is a alloy of cobalt, chromium, and nickel. The high molecular weight polyethylene is a polymer material. Then we have this fabric made of polyethylene terephthalate. This is the common polyester what we use for our dress materials. These are hand sewn to form this particular shape. And this suture ring, we call it a sewing ring, is used for stitching the valve onto the muscles of the heart. Slowly the muscle tissues will grow into this fabric and a nice joint will be formed. Now, these are the fabrication strategies for the valve. We have the Haynes 25 cage, which was CNC machined from solid metallic block and polished to prosthetic quality. Then this ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene was not a material which can be easily processed. The conventional injection molding and compression molding techniques were not suitable for this. So we need to develop two specific processing strategies we call as the solid state compaction technique along with the cryo machining technique, in which the component is cooled to sub-zero temperatures during the machining process, and the solid state compaction is used for imparting the surface finish of the disc. Then the polyester suturing is normally sort of stitched using polyester sewing fabrics. And once you have the prototypes ready, then these valves have to go through many regulatory testing activities. So in 1980, when we started the work, there were no Indian standards available for this particular product. So we chose an American national standard, CDP3, for carrying out all the studies. And these studies include functional evaluation, durability evaluation, and animal evaluation in large animals. So these are some of the test systems which we used then in the 80s for doing the evaluation. The one on the right side is called a pulse duplicator. It virtually simulates the systemic circulation. Here actually we have the provision for the mitral valve. On this arm we have the aortic valve, and here we have specific rubber balloons used for simulating the ventricular contraction. Then all these gadgets together forms the ventricular compliance, then systemic compliance, and the systemic resistance. So it's more or less emulates the functioning of the systemic circulatory system. Then these are some of the results from those studies. Actually, this particular, the one on the left side shows the gradient. The gradient is the pressure drop across the valve for different flow rates. And lower the gradients, lower the resistance offered by the valve. So less effort is required for maintaining same cardiac output. So it just sort of matching with the control devices. Similarly, this is another parameter called the shear forces on the blood when the valve is functioning. When you have higher shear forces, it can lead to damage to the blood cells and eventually leading to anemia or platelet adhesion, various complications related to damaged blood cells. So here also what we need is lower levels of shear forces. Then another major factor which is to be looked at is what is called the closing impact forces. Impact forces means when the valve closes, there will be some impact energy, and how much force is generated during the closing mechanism or closing dynamics. And that also it's better to have lower impact forces. If you look, these are the other predicate devices which were in the market at that point of time. We found that the impact forces are relatively low. This was mainly because all other models used a particular material called pyrolytic carbon. Pyrolytic carbon is basically low temperature isotropic carbon with a density of somewhere about 2.4 to 2.5 and hardness close to that of alumina or diamond. That means it's an extremely hard material, and the relative difference between the density of blood and that of this material is very high, leading to high impact forces. In the case of the Chitra valve, the disc material was ultra-high molecular polyethylene, which had a density of 0.95, and it was very close to the density of blood, which is about 1.08. And in this process, the ultra-high molecular polyethylene disc tend to float along with the blood, thereby reducing the impact forces. And this is an interesting sort of phenomena, what we call as cavitation. At least some of you who are in the mechanical stream would have studied about the cavitation damage to Pelton wheels and turbines, etc. What happens is when you have a fluid which is flowing, and if you suddenly stop the flow, then at the point of stoppage on the inflow side, there will be a buildup of positive pressure because the fluid element continued to move towards the closed sort of closer device and put positive pressure on the device. Whereas the fluid element which are on the distal side or on the outflow side continues to flow away from the closure device, thereby generating a negative pressure. And if this negative pressure happens to cross the vapor pressure of the fluid, then there will be a phase change and the formation of bubbles, that is vapor bubbles. And these vapor bubbles, when it collapses on the surface of the closure device, there is likelihood of severe damage to the closure device as well as the blood cells in that vicinity. And this particular phenomena is one of the major failure modes in the case of valves. And we did a series of studies at the University of Iowa on this, and we found that the one which is on the top, which depicts the soft disk valve, the negative pressure formation is extremely low. And because of this, the propensity for formation of cavitation bubbles is very less. While in the case of hard disk material, the negative pressures of the tune of minus 1500 millimeter of mercury can instantaneously form at the distal or the outflow side of the device. But of course, this particular negative pressure lasts for a few microseconds only, but that is good enough to generate the vapor bubbles and collapse of these bubbles. And these are some of the photographs taken, but the quality of the figure is not very good. If you look at these areas, you can see white particulate type of droplets here. These are the vapor droplets which were photographed using high-speed cameras by C.S. Lee in Penn State University. The one below is the Chitra heart valve, and this is a valve called Jomed. And the one on top is Medtronic Hall. Medtronic Hall is a pyrotic carbon based valve. Here, simultaneously, they recorded the negative pressure ranges. You can see that in the case of the soft disk valve, the negative pressure doesn't go to very low levels, and thereby there is no chance for this cavitation formation. This is one of the major findings in this particular device. And in fact, this was the one of the reasons why this particular device got good entry into artificial left ventricular assist devices, total artificial heart assemblies, etc., because of the ability to resist cavitation formation. Now, as part of the device evaluation, the device has to be tested for at least 400 million cycles, which corresponds to 10 years life in the patient. And based on these results, you can extrapolate for a period of 50 years. The device is tested in a particular system called an accelerated durability tester. The entire system has to be designed and developed here. And the valves are cycled at 10 times the normal heart rate. And it takes typically about 14 to 16 months of continuous testing to reach this 400 million cycles. So any failure during this means you have to go back to drawing board and start redesigning the device. That is the reason for the long gestation period for development of this type of devices. So based on the results, we estimate that the service life of the device is in excess of 50 years. The structural life will be better than 50 years inside the patient. Once all these laboratory tests, we call as the in vitro tests, are completed, then the device is put in large animals. We chose sheep as the animal model. It's placed in the mitral position of the sheep. Then the animals are electively sacrificed, and detailed histopathological evaluation is carried out after the autopsy. This is the valve immediately after implantation, and after about 6 months in the valve. You can see that the suturing is completely covered with soft whitish tissue, which has grown into the suturing and sort of created a nice joint between the surrounding muscular tissue and the valve. But the problem sometimes is this tissue will not stop growing, and it will start growing into the annulus and start blocking the sort of functioning of the device. And that is in order to reduce that only, we have a lot of hydrodynamic studies being carried out on the device to make sure that there are no regions of turbulence and stasis in the vicinity of the device. So once all these evaluations are completed, then it has to go through what is called an ethical clearance. There is a empowered committee which looks at the data, and then clears the device for clinical use, and subsequently the first clinical implantation was in Sri Chitra in December 1990. And subsequently, about 40 cases were carried out in Chitra. And based on the results, we extended the clinical trials to 5 more centers. In total, 306 valves were implanted. And based on the sort of outcome from this clinical trials, a national level monitoring committee sort of studied the results and finally declared the device ready for commercial exploitation. So the commercial, the technology transfer was to a company based in Chennai, TTK Healthcare. Now they have their plan set up in Trivandrum, and we had a partner, National Research Development Corporation, New Delhi, for the technology transfer activities. So that concludes the first part, the first model of the valve. I'll quickly take you through the rest of the history in the next 15 to 20 minutes or so. So this forms the clinical feedback from the Chitra model TC1. There are 4 different studies spread over a period of about 10 years. And these are some of the major failure modes. Thrombosis means clotting of blood on the surface of the device and eventually leading to tissue overgrowth or the entire mechanism of the valve getting affected by this particular growth. And that phenomena is called thrombosis. Thrombosis is a tissue overgrowth or a growth in the vicinity of the valve. Then embolism means when you have a small blood clots getting formed that can dislodge from the valve and go and block small blood vessels downstream. It could be in the kidney, it could be in the liver, or it could be in the brain. So such events are called embolisms. And anticoagulant related hemorrhage means in order to reduce the propensity for this embolism and thrombosis, there is a drug which has to be taken regularly by the patient. That drug is called anticoagulant. And sometimes if the dosage of this anticoagulant is increased or higher, then there is a possibility that the patient will start developing bleeding from various locations like gum or sort of nose, etc. So these are the 3 major clinical complications because of the implantation of the device. So these we compare. We found that in all these cases, actually this Medtronic Hall and Jock-Shelley are 2 predicate devices which were in the market for more than 10 years. And the first one and last one relate to the Chitra valve. If we look at the complications, it's between 4 to 5% in all the valves, but still the complications do exist. And that was the outcome from the clinical trials as well as the post-market surveillance of the valves in the clinic. Now the feedback can be summarized as thrombus, embolism, and anticoagulation related hemorrhage forms a major part of the valve related complications. And early valve thrombus during the first year after implantation could be related to the healing pattern. So basically what we found that there is a possibility of improving the healing pattern by sort of suitably modifying the suturing and the cage designs. And if it can be addressed, then this 4 to 5% complications can be brought down and the quality of life of the patient can be improved. And another point was the average prevalence of rheumatic heart disease in the country was continued to be in the same range or marginally less than that was prevailing in 1970s and 80s. So there is still a possibility of the need for mechanical valves for the next 20 or 25 years or so. So what we thought that we will try to improve upon this valve and come out with a new model. So the average age of the patient from 20s in the 1970s has risen to 40s in 2000, but still it is not, the age is not yet where you can put in a biological valve. If you put a biological valve at the age of 40, then you may require 2 or 3 revisions after that. So the general recommendation is that biological valves are not put to patients below the age of 55 unless there is an indication like the patient cannot take anticoagulation because of certain reasons, like the patient is hemophilic or the patient has to bear child, or if these type of conditions doesn't prevail, then the patient has to be given a mechanical valve. Otherwise, there will be complications and revisions will be required. So there was a need for mechanical valve in the next 15 to 20 years or so, or more than that. So with all these inputs, we decided to come out with the second model with an improved design. We also tried to improve what is called the MRI compatibility. MRI is a technique which is used for imaging the tissues of the patient. And one of the problems of having a metal frame there, metal cage there, is that this will substantially alter the image gathered from that particular area. It may not have any untoward event towards the patient. It won't compromise the safety of the patient, but there could be substantial artifacts on the image. So that we wanted to address by changing the cobalt-based alloy to a titanium alloy. It was well proven that titanium is more MRI compatible than cobalt-based alloys. Then we also want to reduce the embolism episodes substantially. So we decided to provide a titanium nitride coating on the cage surface so that the metal exposed to the bloodstream is eliminated, and the metal ion elution from the cage into the surrounding tissues also substantially controlled. So these are the major changes brought in by this new design. And this is the new valve, where we have titanium nitride coated titanium 6Al4V as the frame, ultra high molecular weight polyethylene as the occluder, and the same polyester switcher ring. Here, the basic difference between this and the previous model is you can look at the what we call as the minor orifice flow area. That is the area available for flow in the open condition in the minor orifice. This has been enhanced from 26% of the total to 33% of the total. That's about 30% increase in the minor orifice flow, thereby reducing the thromboembolic events in the minor orifice region. Once the flow is better, any microthrombi which gets formed will get washed off and it won't allow the thrombi to build there. So these are the components in the TC2, that is the second model, where we have the ultra high molecular weight polyethylene occluder, then titanium nitride coated titanium frame, and the polyester switcher ring. These are assembled to form the device. Of course, even though it is an incremental improvement over the existing valve, we didn't want to treat it as an improved device. We wanted to treat it as a new valve, because the standards which were in place for evaluating this device has substantially changed. And unless we meet the standards which are prevailing internationally, the market may not accept this device at a later stage. So we went to qualify the device based on the Indian standard, because our primary market in India. And we also chose the international standard ISO 5840. This is the gold standard for the cardiovascular devices, so this is the cardiac valves. And this is the valve with the holder in place. And this holder will be removed after the valve is stitched onto the muscles of the heart. This is for aiding the surgeon for handling the device. it is normally suggested that the surgeon or others doesn't touch the surface of the device with their gloved hands, mainly because their gloves may contain some blood stains, which gets transferred to this device, may create thrombus formation on that side. So a holder is provided along with the device to make sure that the surgeon doesn't touch the device during the stitching process. So the primary design improvements included a titanium nitride coating, which improves the blood compatibility, then increasing the minor orifice area from 23 to 33%, sorry, and improvement of 20% of effective orifice area. Effective orifice area is a measure of the pressure drop across the valve. So we went through extensive studies. Actually, the in silico studies are normally carried out to make sure that the structures work properly, and we sort of established that there is a 4:1 safety margin with respect to the stress levels and a 20:1 safety margin with respect to the deflection linked failures. Then detailed computational fluid flow visualization as well as fluid dynamic study was carried out, and basically to look at the areas of stagnation, any recirculation or regions of negative flow. All those things are important because the blood has a tendency to clot if there are regions of stasis. So that was carried out. Then all the fluid dynamics was experimentally sort of carried out. So these are the control devices are the predicate devices in the market, and for each size you can see that the predicate device and the this particular one matches. Then the pulse duplicate studies also showed that the average pressure drops are the lowest in the different valves available in the market, like the VSS, Carbomedics, Medtronic, and all the popular brands in the market. It was matching or marginally less than many of the devices. Even the effective orifice area, which is again a measure of the gradient, also found to be good, comparable to the other devices. Then the durability was studied, and based on the durability studies for more than 2,000 million cycles, we estimated that the structural life of the device will be 50 years or better. Then subsequently, these valves are implanted in animals for a period of 3 months and 6 months, and they were sacrificed at 3 months and 6 months for doing the histopathology studies. Now here you can see the difference between the existing model, which is the TC1 and TC2. Well, I had mentioned that there is a propensity for the tissue to overgrow into the annulus and sort of hinder the movement of the disc. You can see that because of the titanium nitride coating and the hemodynamic sort of compliant designs which it did, this tissue is not growing into the annulus. Of course, this was validated by our studies in the sort of flow dynamics. You can see that in flow dynamics, we see 2 areas where even though it is not negative flow, there will be the velocity of flow is extremely low. And correspondingly, at those regions, you can see that the tissue is growing more into the frame than in the other regions. So, of course, this was presented in the World Biomaterials Congress, and let's sort of get good sort of reference for this particular work. Now, the current status of this particular model is that the device, all the regulatory clearance have been obtained, and the ethical clearance are also through, and is ready for clinical trials. March next month, we are planning to start the actual clinical use. Now I'll just cover the last model, the Chitra tissue valve, which is it's a product which is gearing up for the future. So I'll just have a look at the difference between tissue valve and mechanical valve. The mechanical valves are usually last about 30 years or more. That has been the experience with almost all models of the valves. Less likely to need a mechanical valve to be replaced. they can, but the problem is they can cause blood clots. So the patient will have to take a blood thinner called anticoagulant. But tissue valves are less likely to cause blood clots, so no need for taking anticoagulants. But the problem with the tissue valves is that they don't last as long as mechanical valves, so they need to be replaced 10 to 12 years in young patients, probably 10 to 15 years in elderly patients. So the tissue valves are recommended for patients with 60 plus years of age, unless the patient has issues related to taking anticoagulants. So this is some of the recent studies in 2012. Now you just have a look at the prevalence of rheumatic heart disease in the younger population. It was between 6 to 11 per thousand in 1970s. It's come down to 3 to 6 in 1980s, close to 4 in 90s, and by 2012 it is about 2%. That means in another 10 years, the prevalence of rheumatic heart disease is going to be substantially controlled. That means the need for valves in the younger patients are going to come down. But at the same time, with the increased life expectancy, there will be need for tissue valves, especially for the elderly patients. So that is the reason why we went into this tissue valve development. These are some of the tissue valves which are being marketed now. These are either made from pericardium of the animals, or by taking the animal tissue valve itself, reprocess it and mount it. So there are different types and configurations available. We chose what is called a stented valve design, where the device has a regular structure and based on a bovine pericardial tissue. And one of the major constraints in the life of this tissue valve is the calcification. So there is an anti-calcification treatment which is quite proprietary, and none of the manufacturers will disclose that particular process. But of course, you can buy the valves and test out in your experimental setup. So this is one such study which we did with some 3 different imported valves and 2 processes which we developed. And this particular STS-GLY process seems to have extremely good anti-calcification properties, which means with this particular process, we should be able to reach 20 to 25 years of service life of the valve. And this is the first prototypes which are sort of coming up now. And probably in another 5 years, by end of 24-25, we will have the device in the clinic. So to recap, we had the first valve model in 1980, then the first clinical model in 1990, the commercial launch in 95, the second model TC2, which is going to clinic in 2021, and the third model tissue valve, which is expected to come in 2024-25. This sort of summarizes the history or the story behind the development of the Chitra heart valve. But the true significance of the Chitra heart valve development lies in the fact that it's a triumphant demonstration that the technology of heart valve substitute, which was a sort of an oligopoly of rich nations, could be mastered by a developing country with determination and perseverance. And this has been a sort of very rewarding experience. So before I close, I'll just take a couple of minutes to give you an overview about the medical device R&D in India, and how the institutions like NIT and other academic institutions can contribute in this particular segment. This is a sort of a picture about the global medical device market, which is altogether around $400 billion US dollars. US market alone is more than 90 billion. Unfortunately, our total market size is only 4 billion with more than 130 billion population, and ranks 20th in the world. And the primary reason for low use of devices is the cost. And this is the sort of structure of the medical device industry in India. It's valued at about 32,000 crores. But you just have a look at this particular figure. There are hardly 2% of the industries with a sales turnover of more than $100 million. And about 65% is having less than $2 million turnover. That means bulk of the industry in India in the medical device segment is in the micro, small and medium scale enterprises. And the industry doesn't have enough resources for carrying out R&D in medical device segment. So what we need is, these are the challenges to the growth of medical device industry in the country. The first one is inadequate investment in industrial R&D. Primary reason being most of the industries are in the MSME segment. Then the need for GMP facilities which are capital intensive. Then the inadequate testing facilities, again non-availability of dedicated test houses. Poor quality national regulatory mechanism. This scenario is changing in the last 3 or 4 years. And once you have a very low quality national regulatory mechanism, none of the international players will accept you. And of course, lack of skilled manpower. These are the areas where we need to address. So what is required is handholding with the medical device industry. Academic institutions have a major role to play by promoting industrial R&D, and public funded R&D institutions need to support through more translational research. I think this is the need of the hour. And with this pandemic and our lack of preparedness in the public health segment has clearly shown that we need to upgrade our healthcare technology system substantially to make sure that in the next pandemic, we don't lose more lives. So with this, I'll close my session. I'll be more than happy to sort of answer any questions or any point you would like to discuss.
Sir, thank you very much for a very informative and very thought-provoking talk. We will have a few questions. We already have one question which is given in the chat box. I think this is probably partially answered by you in your talk, but still I'll share the question with you. The person says that his father has undergone a corrective surgery for a mitral valve, but the doctors told that it may need replacement after a few years. So he just wants to know whether it is really required to have a replacement or whether it can be avoided using medication. Not a personal question.
This is purely a clinical decision. And actually how the clinician makes the decision is, he will do a echocardiography and assess the flow through the valve and see whether there is severe regurgitation or is it regurgitation currently acceptable. And in that case, you will wait for some more time if that gets corrected by itself due to overgrowth or something, that you will wait for it. But normally these type of decisions are purely clinicians' decisions. I think it's best is to go by the decision of the clinician. Of course, there are many cases where if it's not a very complex lesion, then there is a possibility that the person can live without any complications for years together. Of course, this decision has to be purely based on the observations of the clinician.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Dr. Sumar, the mechanical department. He wants to ask whether how do you model non-Newtonian behavior in your CFD simulations?
Okay. In fact, that's a very interesting question. Basically, what we do in our CFD simulation is we don't use CFD as a primary mode of evaluation. CFD is used as a secondary mode of evaluation. The primary mode is always experimental. We have a laser Doppler anemometer and a pulse Doppler anemometer. And these figures and the velocity profiles obtained from these devices are used more than the CFD. What we do is we try to correlate the CFD with these experimental results and strengthen the correlation and collect data and build a database so that after probably about 100, 200, 300 runs of experiments, we will be in a position to use the computational techniques much better. Right now, our computational techniques are only as a complementary sort of facility. Primary facility is experimental.
Okay, thank you, sir. Another question is, do you use actual scale model geometry in your experiments or scale up or scale down models?
Normally, we use actual geometry.
Okay.
Because actual geometry is important, because especially when you are trying to look at the shear induced blood damage, the geometry has a big bearing because the relative sizes between blood cells and the structure has a bearing on the shear induced blood damage. So we normally use actual geometry itself.
Okay, thank you. Another question is whether it is possible to use non-mechanical valves like Tesla valve to avoid wear and tear.
In fact, if you look at the museum, there is actually Edwards Laboratory has a museum. There are about 180 extinct valves displayed there. And this Tesla type design also is one of them. The main problem here is it is not the mechanical system which eventually fails. It is the combination of mechanical and the biological system together fails. Because extremely good mechanical valve designs may not work well in this type of environment, mainly because the blood damage during the functioning of the device is one major factor in the success of the device in the specific location. So we should be able to control the blood damage effectively. Otherwise, this blood damage will sort of generate a cascade of events, what we call platelet aggregation and platelet attachment. And that will be detrimental to the device. So it's not just the mechanical wear and tear. There are more to do with the biological system also.
Okay, thank you, sir. Another question is why this valve replacement is done for the mitral valve? Okay, you said that there are 4 different types of valve. Why it is focused on the mitral valve mostly?
If you look at if you just try to remember the anatomical configuration, mitral valve forms the inlet. The mitral valve is at the inlet of the left ventricle. And that valve will be in the closed condition when the ventricle is pumping. When the ventricle is pumping, the pressure in the ventricle could be as high as 160 millimeter of mercury. So in the closed condition, mitral valve sees 160 to 180 millimeter of mercury, whereas in the case of aortic valve, in the closed condition, it sees about 100 to 120 millimeter of mercury. So the maximum load during functioning of the heart happens in the vicinity of the mitral valve. And that is the reason why mitral valve fails more often. There are, of course, there are other anatomical reasons also, because mitral valve has a peculiar structure called a bileaflet structure with a caudate tendineae. And there are more number of failure modes possible in mitral valve than the aortic valve or the pulmonary valve.
Okay, thank you. So participants, if you have any questions, please you can send it through the chat, or if anybody wants to ask it directly, they can unmute themselves and ask that also. Okay, another question is, what is the reason for this decrease in this rheumatic heart disease, heart failures? You said that initially it was around 4, now it has reduced to like 2. So 2%. What is the reason for that? Is it the improvement in the general health conditions?
It's not the improvement in the health condition alone. More than that, now the parents are more careful in managing the recurrent fever and recurrent throat infections. And they know that if it is unchecked, then there is a possibility of either a valvular disease or a joint disease developing at a later stage.
Okay.
So basically what is happening is the prophylaxis at the community level is substantially strengthened throughout the country. So there is automatically there will be a reduction in the associated complications due to RHD.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions? Yeah, there is a question from Dr. Deepak Lawrence. What is the influence of surface roughness on the performance of the valve, and what is the specification of the surface average RA value on the polymer valves? Yeah.
Surface conditions, both roughness as well as contaminations, are two very important parameters. Normally, for blood contacting devices, the surface roughness has to be better than 0.1 micron RA. And if it is metal, we try to reach somewhere about 0.05 micron RA. And if the surface roughness is high, if it crosses about 0.3 micron RA, if it is poorer than 0.3 micron RA, then what happens is there is a particular blood cell called platelet. Platelet is a particular type of cell which tries to isolate anything which is not biological. So whenever it comes in contact with the valve or any synthetic material, it tries to attach itself to the synthetic material and try to isolate from the biological system. And if the roughness is high, that is about 0.3 or better, then the propensity for this platelet to get adhered and attached onto the surface is higher, because of the tentacles which are available are in the region of 0.1 to 0.2 micrometer size. So you can easily attach it to all these crevices and get attached onto it. That is the reason why if you keep a surface finish better than 0.1, this platelet doesn't seem to get attached onto the surface.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other questions? If there are no more questions, probably we can. Yeah, there is another question from Dr. Deepak Lawrence. What is the how do you select TTK for manufacturing? Selection of TTK for manufacturing.
Okay, it was not a selection. We are trying to coerce them and bring them into the business. Mainly because big industrial houses will not risk on high-risk medical devices. Mainly because they don't want to risk their reputation. Because these devices are high risk in the patient as well as high risk in the market also. So none of the big houses, big industrial houses, were willing to take up this particular product. So what we did was we tried to sort of convince the TTK management and also provided them with an interface. In fact, one of the senior scientists from the institute resigned and joined TTK as an interface. In fact, we had to do all these things in the early days, mainly because our credibility was not established and the risk associated with the medical devices were very high. It was more like a sort of marriage taking place with exchange of people. And that is how the first technology transfer was achieved.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I think close to 1.5 hours. Probably we can wind up if there are. Yeah, there is another question from Dr. R. Manu. Yeah, it is. I think it is. It's a comment. It says that it was a very detailed description of the development and features of TTK Chitra mechanical valve. As a cardiac surgeon, I am proud of the contribution of biomedical wing of Chitra, and he hopes that the tissue valve of the Chitra comes soon.
Yeah, Dr. RMR is from Calicut Medical College?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, there is another question. Will anticoagulants need to be used lifelong after the valve is implanted?
Yeah, if the mechanical valves are implanted, then it has to be used lifelong. Not only that, the concentration or the dosage has to be titrated regularly to make sure that the dosage is right for the patient. And that is a difficult task.
So maybe one last question. So what is the possibility of having a research tie-up between NIT Calicut and ACT? What are the possibilities and what
I
are the
think you can
procedures?
definitely explore that. We used to have it long back when Dr. Devdas Menon was there. Dr. Devdas Menon and Dr. Namboodiripad was there in the mechanical engineering department. And we used to have a lot of work together, especially in the biomechanics segment.
Okay.
In fact, we can sort of think of a tie-up and probably some exchanges, exchange visits, and some student programs. I think we can have something formulated.
Okay. So who has to be approached for those?
I'll send you the details. Probably you can have it initiated through the head of the biomedical technology wing.
Okay.
He is the person responsible, and of course, it has to go through the dean and the academic segment also, because we also have certain academic programs like sort of a postdoctoral training in medical specialties and PhD programs, and of course, we also have an MTech in clinical engineering with IIT Madras as partner.
Oh, okay.
Actually, the Sri Chitra is a university by itself.
Yeah, yeah.
So it has to be routed through the academic session as well as the medical technology.
Okay. So if there are no more questions, I think we will wind up today's session. It is my privilege to propose the vote of thanks for this session. It was a very informative session, and I think it for a technology community like that of NIT Calicut, a lot of inputs were shared from the point of view of selection of materials which are applicable for the biological systems, then the possibility of doing fluid dynamic simulations in these biological systems, reliability engineering, because we were talking about like 2000 million cycles requirement, and also those of and structural analysis of the valves and other components that are being used. So there are a lot of points that have been put forward, which I'm sure that the research community of NIT Calicut will possibly take it forward. And I'm extremely thankful to Mr. Muralidharan sir for spending his time, taking so much effort to prepare so much slides, share his lifelong research experiences with the NIT community. Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your time with us. And we are extremely honored to when we hear it from one of our own alumnus. So we are so proud of you, sir. And
thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yeah.
And my privilege too.
Thank you. And I would also like to thank our director, Sati ma'am, Dean Alumni Affairs, Jivama ma'am. A lot of HODs have joined, faculty members, non-teaching staff. We had a few doctors also joined our session. the students, non-teaching staff. I would like to thank all of you for joining this session, and we hope to bring you a lot of similar sessions as part of the Distinguished Alumni Lecture Series. Once again, thank you all, and thank you, Muralidharan sir, for this.
Okay, bye.
Thank you all.